My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. In the beginning, God made everything. God simply spoke and the world came to be. He sent a flood.
Your feet, you're the only one I need. I turn to you and you are always there. In troubled times it's you I see. I put you first, that's all I need. I humble all I am, all to you. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. You're the only one, you're the only one, you're the only one that I could live for. You're the only one, you're the only one, you're the only one that I could live for. You were always, always there, every how and everywhere. Your grace abounds so deeply within me. You will never ever change. Yesterday, today, the same. Forever till forever meets no end. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. Are you having fun? Well, what we're gonna do now is we're all gonna get down nice and low. That's it, how low can you go? And we're gonna sing, you are the way, the truth and the life. Come on, let me hear ya. You are the way, the truth and the life. We live by faith and not by sight. For you, we're living all for you. Up a bit higher. You are the way, the truth and the life. We live by faith and not by sight. For you, we're living all for you. You are the way. You are the way, the truth and the life. We live by faith and not by sight. For you, we're living all for you. You are the way, the truth and the life. We live by faith and not by sight. For you, we're living all for you. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. Oh yeah! Come on!
My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. In the beginning, God made everything. God simply spoke and the world came to be. He sent a flood and made everything new. He parted the sea and let his people walk through. He helped a boy bring a giant right down. Joshua marched, the walls fell to the ground. These acts of power are worthy of praise. But if you want to question my God and his ways, I'll look you in the eye and say, my God is so big and so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. Though we are sinners, he still gave us worth. God sent his son to live here on the earth. He healed the sick, he made blind men see. He let the lame walk and he set the world free. He died on a cross and he rose from the grave. He conquered sin, he is mighty to save. He went to heaven and he's coming back. God's word is true, but if it's attacked, I'll look you in the eye and say, my God is so big and so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. God the Spirit, God the Father, God the Son. 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. God the Spirit, God the Father, God the Son. 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. I'm not afraid because God is so big and so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big and so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do.
Solomon builds the temple. 1 Kings 5-8. Solomon was chosen by his father, King David, to become the third king of Israel. In this lesson, we will see how Solomon showed his love for God by building the temple in Jerusalem. How do you feel when someone gives you a gift? Do you feel happy and excited? I feel so happy when I finally get something that I have wanted a long time. Don't you? Did you know that God is happy when we give him gifts? Have you ever thought about what you could give to God? In this lesson, we will learn how King Solomon showed his love for God by building the temple in Jerusalem. This lesson is found in the book of 1 Kings. This book tells the history of the kings of Israel and Judah. It is in the second group of Old Testament books called the historical books. These books begin with Joshua and go through Esther. Let's say these books: Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. King David was the greatest king of Israel because he loved the Lord his God with all his heart. One of King David's desires was to build a temple building in Jerusalem where the Lord could be worshiped. However, God did not allow King David to build a temple because he had been a man of war. So, King David prepared a plot of land on a high hill in the city of Jerusalem for his son to build the temple. He also gathered some of the building materials that he would need. He even collected a great amount of gold to be used in the construction. Just before David, the king of Israel, died, he told his son Solomon that he would be the next king. King David also told Solomon that he should build a temple for God. He gave him the instructions for building the temple. He said, "Be strong and courageous and do the work, for the Lord is with you. He will not fail you or forsake you until all the work is finished." Solomon was a young man when he became the king of Israel. He showed his love for God by worshiping him and offering 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar. That night, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream. God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Solomon knew that he did not have the experience or wisdom to govern the nation of Israel. So he asked God for wisdom. God was very pleased with Solomon, so he gave him not only wisdom, but great wealth, much knowledge, and much power. Soon, Solomon became very rich. As the king, he could do anything he wanted with all his gold and silver and food. But Solomon loved God, and he was grateful for all the gifts God had given him. Solomon wanted to give a gift to God. He decided to use his riches to build a beautiful temple where people could worship God. Solomon knew that he would need big, strong beams to build a temple. He knew that the only place where trees grew that were big enough to make these beams were the cedar trees in Lebanon. The cedar trees in Lebanon were owned by his friend King Hiram. So King Solomon sent word to King Hiram and made a deal to purchase logs from the trees. This was the deal. King Hiram needed wheat, barley, and olive oil for food for his royal household. So Solomon traded these for the trees. Solomon sent over 20,000 bushels of wheat to King Hiram and his family. Over 30,000 woodcutters were needed to work in shifts to cut the tall trees in Lebanon. So King Hiram and King Solomon's men worked together to chop down the large hardwood trees. The cedar trees and the juniper trees were then floated down the coast to Joppa. Next, they were pulled ashore and then hauled overland to Jerusalem. These logs would be used to make the strong beams and the frame for the temple building. The men worked 10 months just to get the logs. This was a huge job. Building the temple was a big job, so King Solomon knew that he needed a very dependable man to oversee the construction. So he put a man named Adoniram in charge of the workers. King Solomon and Adoniram would work and plan every day to make sure the temple building was going on as planned. King Solomon also needed some large stones to use to build the walls of the temple. So he sent 80,000 stone cutters to the hills to cut huge blocks of stone. These blocks of stone were very heavy, and they had to be moved to Jerusalem, where the temple was to be built. Solomon then sent 70,000 men to carry the stones from the hills back to the city of Jerusalem. This was a long, hard work because there were no cranes or heavy trucks to move the stones. They all had to be carried by hand. When the big block stones arrived, King Solomon told the workers to lay a strong foundation for the walls of the temple. The blocks were already cut because King Solomon ordered that the place of the temple was to be very quiet. No hammer sounds or chisel noise or other iron tools were allowed. After the stone walls were laid, King Solomon had the inside of the temple walls lined with cedar boards. Everything inside the temple was covered with cedar, so that no part of the stones could be seen. The panels reached from the floor to the ceiling of the temple. All the walls were then beautifully carved with angels, palm trees, and flowers. The temple was 3 stories tall. It was 90 feet wide and 30 feet long and 45 feet tall. All along the top of the 3rd story, King Solomon had the workers put in narrow, tall windows. These windows let in the sunshine, so the inside of the temple was bright and beautiful. But King Solomon was not done yet. Next, he sent for gold, silver, and bronze from all over the land to be brought to the city of Jerusalem to use in the temple. These were very precious metals and very valuable. All this gold and silver was melted down and used to line the whole inside of the temple. The temple walls, the floor, and the altar were all covered with pure gold. The inner sanctuary, or the holy place, was overlaid inside with pure gold too. The walls of the inner and outer rooms were also covered with gold. The temple had a special room called the Holy of Holies. This was the place where the Ark of the Covenant was to be kept. The Ark of the Covenant had 2 cherubim, or angels, on the top of it. The Ark of the Covenant and the angels were all covered with pure gold. Just outside the Holy of Holies was another room called the Holy Place. The walls in this room were also covered with gold. In this room was a special candlestick. Solomon had special craftsmen to make the candlestick. It was called the golden lampstand, and it had 7 places for light to burn. The candlestick, or lampstand as it was called, sat next to a table called the table of showbread, which had some special dishes. All of these were covered with beautiful gold. What a wonderful, beautiful sight this was. Bright, shiny gold everywhere. Another piece of furniture in the holy place was the altar of incense. The basins were made of pure gold, along with wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, dishes, and censers. On the walls inside the temple were carvings of gold floral work, large golden cherubim, golden lamps and tongs. Even the silver and gold furnishings that King David had dedicated when he was alive were brought into the temple. What a beautiful place it was! Inside the temple were special curtains that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies. The weavers worked many long months making the drapes. The cloth was covered with gold thread. Then they were embroidered with silk thread that was dyed in rich colors. At the entrance to the temple, King Solomon had his carpenters make doors of olive wood. The doors turned on carved sockets. He had the carvers engrave cherubim, palm trees, and flowers on the doors. Then all the doors were overlaid with gold that was spread evenly over the carvings. But Solomon was not done yet. He built a special porch with tall columns outside the temple. Top craftsmen were hired from King Hiram to make 2 large pillars for the portico of the temple. The portico, or porch, had a roof with long beams that rested on the columns. Outside the temple gate was a large wash basin, which stood on the top of 12 bronze bulls. 10 movable stands and basins were also crafted in bronze. This project took King Solomon and over 150,000 laborers over a period of 7 years to build. The temple was like no other building that had ever been built. It was incredibly beautiful and very expensive to build. When the temple was done, King Solomon called all the leaders of the people of Israel together. He told them to come together for a great worship service. They would bring the Ark of the Covenant from the tabernacle into the temple. On the day of the dedication, everyone worshiped God. After offering a sacrifice, the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant to the temple. Solomon led all the people in a joyful parade to take the Ark to the temple. The musicians blew their trumpets and played the cymbals. The people sang a song praising the Lord. They said, for he is good, and his mercy endures forever. The procession led right into the temple. The Ark of the Covenant was put in the most holy place, beneath the wings of the cherubim. Then the priests left the holy place. After the ark was placed in the temple, an amazing thing happened. Suddenly, the temple was filled with a cloud. The cloud of the glory of the Lord filled the place, and it was so overwhelming that the priests were unable to perform their duties. Solomon knew that the cloud was God's way of saying that he was there and that he was very, very pleased with this temple. Solomon stood in front of the temple and prayed to God. He turned to the people and blessed them. Then he spread his arms and knelt and prayed. Solomon thanked God for keeping his promises to all the people. He also asked God to take care of all the people forever. God listened to Solomon's prayer of dedication for the temple, and he promised to be with the Israelites. God said, I have consecrated this temple by putting my name there forever. If you obey me, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. But if you or your descendants turn away from me and worship other gods, I will cut them off from the promised land, and the temple will become a heap of rubble. They offered 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep and goats in a sacrifice. They thanked the Lord for his goodness and mercy and for helping them to complete such an important job. The people were so happy. They stayed at the temple and celebrated for 14 days. Because God had given Solomon so many wonderful gifts, Solomon wanted to give something to God to show his love and thanks. Building the temple was his gift to God. Solomon gave cheerfully of all his riches. Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. He knew that God is pleased when we give cheerfully to him. Our memory verse is 2 Corinthians 9:7. God loves a cheerful giver. Our attitude when we give is more important than the amount that we give. God has given us everything we have. Giving is only returning what rightfully belongs to him. Let's say that verse again together. 2 Corinthians 9:7. God loves a cheerful giver. God has given you and me so many good things. What is something that you are glad God has given you? Are you glad for your family, home, your food, or for our church? We should remember to thank God for these things. It pleases God when we show him our love and thanks.